What if everything you thought you knew about history's first collapse was wrong? 6,000 years ago, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, humanity's first great civilization rose from the desert sands. They invented writing, created the wheel, developed mathematics, built the first cities, and then they vanished. For centuries, historians blamed simple answers: climate change, invasion, resource depletion. But what if the real story was far more complex and far more relevant to our world today? What if the collapse of Sumer, mankind's first civilization, wasn't just about environmental catastrophe or warfare, but about something buried in the very foundations of how we build societies? To understand how humanity's first civilization fell, we first need to understand how it rose. Here in what's now southern Iraq, the story of complex human society began. The Sumerians didn't just build villages, they created the template for what we now call civilization. The world's first writing system, cuneiform. The first wheel, the first schools, the first written laws. The first literature including the Epic of Gilgamesh, the 60-minute hour and 360-degree circle. By 3500 BCE, cities like Uruk may have housed up to 80,000 people, a scale of human organization never before seen on Earth. At the heart of each city-state stood massive ziggurats, temple complexes dedicated to patron deities. Religion, politics and economics were inseparable in Sumerian society, but the true engine of Sumerian success was agricultural innovation. In a region receiving less than 10 inches of rainfall annually, they engineered complex irrigation systems that transformed desert into farmland. What made Sumer remarkable wasn't just that they built cities or invented writing. It was their ability to solve the fundamental problem of creating food surpluses in an environment that, on its surface, seemed completely hostile to large-scale agriculture. For nearly 2,000 years, this system worked brilliantly. Then, almost like a switch had been flipped, it began to fail. For decades, the collapse of Sumer around 2000 BCE was explained through a simple narrative: climate change led to drought, drought led to agricultural failure, and civilization crumbled. There's evidence for this. Ice cores and sediment samples show a 300-year drought struck the region. The archaeological record shows population decline, abandoned cities, and migration northward. Others pointed to invasion. The Akkadians under Sargon established history's first empire by conquering the Sumerian city-states around 2335 BCE. Perhaps foreign domination destroyed Sumerian resilience? Still others blamed the Sumerians themselves. Their ingenious irrigation system had a fatal flaw. It gradually increased salt levels in the soil. Year after year, century after century, their fields grew less productive. Simple explanations, neat, tidy, and incomplete. The truth, as we're about to discover, is far more complex and far more unsettling. Recent excavations have revealed evidence that challenges our understanding of Sumer's collapse. Yes, agricultural productivity declined, but not everywhere at once. Some regions maintained productivity while neighboring areas failed completely. New analysis of clay tablets reveals disruption in trade networks decades before climate change intensified. Goods stopped flowing between certain cities while continuing between others. What we're seeing in the data isn't a civilization being destroyed by external forces. We're seeing a civilization tearing itself apart from within, with climate change and other factors accelerating processes that were already underway. The evidence appears in the most unexpected places. Administrative records show increasing taxation and labor demands in the century before collapse. Literary texts show growing disillusionment with rulers and religious institutions. Most telling are changes in burial practices. Early Sumerian graves show relatively equal distribution of wealth. By 2100 BCE, we see extreme disparities, elites buried with massive wealth while common graves become increasingly austere. These aren't just changes in fashion or customs. They reflect fundamental transformations in how Sumerian society organized itself and distributed resources. But the most shocking evidence comes from the cities themselves. Sumerian cities initially developed with public spaces, communal storage, and religious buildings at their center. By 2200 BCE, many had reorganized, with elite compounds increasingly separated from the general population. Urban walls, once built to protect against outside threats, were increasingly used to divide neighborhoods within cities. Legal documents show increasing privatization of what had once been communal resources. Water rights, once managed collectively, became privately controlled. Land that had been worked communally became concentrated in fewer hands. We're seeing a pattern that would become familiar throughout history. As society grew more complex, resource management shifted from communal to hierarchical systems. This created efficiencies but also vulnerabilities. Perhaps most critically, food storage changed. Early Sumerian cities had centralized granaries that could sustain the population during bad years. Later period cities show more dispersed storage concentrated within elite compounds. When climate change and soil salinization struck, these social changes had already undermined resilience. The system had been optimized for wealth concentration rather than survival. The final collapse wasn't sudden. It was a process spanning generations. Cities didn't simply empty overnight. Instead, they transformed. Public institutions failed while private enclaves persisted. Many Sumerians migrated north, joining other Mesopotamian groups like the Babylonians. Their knowledge, skills, and culture persisted, meaning Sumerian civilization transformed rather than disappeared entirely. What died wasn't Sumerian culture or technology, or even their cities in many cases. What collapsed was a particular way of organizing society that had become unsustainable. The evidence points to a complex interplay of factors. Environmental challenges that might have been surmountable with strong social cohesion became insurmountable in a fragmented society. Economic specialization that created prosperity in good times created vulnerability in bad times. As elite groups competed for dwindling resources, the complex web of cooperation that made urban civilization possible began to unravel. The story of Sumer's collapse isn't simply historical curiosity, it's a warning from the distant past. The oldest civilization in human history didn't collapse simply because of climate change, resource depletion, or external threats, though all played a role. It collapsed because its social structures couldn't adapt to these challenges. The Sumerians left us much more than writing, wheels, and mathematics. They left us the first case study in how complex societies succeed and how they fail. The question isn't whether we're smarter than the Sumerians. The question is whether we're wiser. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that no civilization believes it can fall until it does. If you found this video insightful, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. Let's learn from the past to build a better future.